I want to see the crowd move. And an example of this, and it's no disrespect to this band because they're amazing musicians, but Dream Theater, we were in Brazil playing in Monsters of Rock, and they were playing, and I think I was watching the show with these Glenn Hughes and the guys from Manowar were on the side of the stage watching them. And you looked in the crowd, and they're playing through these songs, and we just played, and we had, Gutter Ballet, you had 40,000, 45,000 people bouncing to the beat of Gutter Ballet. Dream Theater's playing, you had 40 people playing air drums throughout the 40,000. If you looked at 40,000 people, you saw 40 Mike Portnoy fans go crazy on air drums, and the rest of the kids were trying to figure out where one was.
Yeah, have you ever tried to headbang to 7/8?
And then all of a sudden, they kicked into part of Enter Sandman and one of the songs they were playing, and the whole crowd started bouncing. And I looked over to frickin' Glenn Hughes, and I was like, see, they found one.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 2020. I am Siobhan Cronin here, well, without our other cohort, but I have Cory Peza. Ben is missing at the moment, dealing with some sort of...
There's a lack of yelling and like blowing out of the eardrums, so it's pretty crazy.
Right.
We're here with part 2 with Chris Caffery, and if you haven't checked out part 1, you got to go check it out. Especially if you're a fan of TSO, Savatage, and he's just had such a big part in the musical world, and it's great to hear him talk about that project. But this week we kind of go a little bit more into him working with Paul O'Neill with TSO, but also more into his musical style and the stuff he's working on nowadays.
Yeah, it was great to hear about his solo project and development, and how he writes a lot, and talking about some of his other artistic interests. So make sure you listen in for this one. Don't forget to go to 2020-d.com to like and subscribe. Check out some of our other episodes. But without further ado, we'll jump right in, part 2 with Chris Caffery.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 2020. I'm Cory Peza, here as always with Benny and Siobhan, and we're super pumped to have back Chris Caffery of Trans-Siberian Orchestra, Savatage, and he also has a new record, Embrace the Unknown, Spirits of Fire, which we are definitely excited to talk a little bit. If you have not checked out part 1, we talk TSO, we talk about Chris's early career, and it's just so cool. He's been in the business a while, would be the best way to put it. So thank you for coming back, man.
I made sure that we all wore exactly the same thing, so we would fit image-wise, so I'm ready to go.
You could have signed off any time, and you're still here with us, so we appreciate it, Chris.
I don't change anyway, so we could actually come back in another week. I'd probably have the same clothes on, so at least
A true homebody. Well, we ended the last episode talking a lot about sort of the creation of TSO and Paul O'Neill, and I had the opportunity in playing in the string section with you guys many times, meeting him a few times, and he truly is like a super powerful personality, and you can kind of feel it when he walks in the room. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about what it was like working with him on the production side or like recording music, because I think so many people don't realize how important he was. For the people that listen. I mean, I feel like he was so much a part of creating that vision and even the music, and it's really cool to watch what he says to people even on stage. So maybe if you could talk a little more about that.
Well, you take a record like Christmas Eve and Other Stories, for example, or a record like Savatage, Dead Winter Dead. Now that idea of doing the Dead Winter Dead record about the war in Sarajevo and Yugoslavia and that whole thing, that was his idea. Now he wrote the lyrics and the story, and it was our responsibility to write songs that were going to carry those personalities. And that's where the whole element of his rock theater element came into things, where your songs. And we were lucky with Savatage because on that record, at least, we had Zach and John had done some songs, so you're able to throw the different voices in. But that's what had happened with TSO. And now, okay, he has these characters, and he wants the female voice to be a female. He wants the father voice to be an older male. He wants the what he feels to be a blues guy to be a raspy older blues kind of voice singing, and he wants this one voice which he hears to be the beginning of his story to be kind of more of a Broadway type of clean tenor voice coming out to sing this. So he would have these visions of what the voice was going to sound like, almost the same way you go, I'm going to use my Telly for this song, I'm going to use my Strat for this song, I'm going to use the Marshall, I'm going to use my wah-wah pedal. He would hear human voices like that to match his vocal ideas, and that of course was very important to the way these records went. But working in the studio with him as a guitar player, it was funny. He would we'd produce the songs and the arrangements, and then he'd kind of let me and the engineer go do our layers of everything, because everything was layered. Like some of the Savatage records, I would have, 2 guitars left and 2 guitars right. And he had a little trademark thing that we would do with a clean Telecaster of just kind of clicking the string notes. So he would want to mix it in if he thought there were times you couldn't even hear the guitar pick as much as he wanted.
For
it was
definition.
like a clean. Yeah, it was a clean Telly track that we would do. So he would know, it's like, all right, this is what I need you to do. So he would kind of just let us go, and he'd be working, and he'd be sitting at the control desk, and he'd have, whatever junk food or wherever it was he was eating at the time. And he'd go through his phases of what he'd like to eat or drink with soda wise. And he'd have a stack of magazines and a stack of newspapers, because he was very intelligent and he always liked to read and learn, and you would think he wasn't even paying attention, and all of a sudden you'd be like, what was that? Like, huh? And he would hear like a string scrape as you're playing, and you'd go rewind to it and be right there, and it's like you don't even think he was paying attention.
Rewind to it. Talk about a different time, right? Rewind it.
And the way he was with solos and things like that, he would want you to do more than you needed to. And his reason for that was, even though this take may have been good enough to make the record, he would always think there could be a possibility you might do something better. And luckily we had the budgets that were able to let us do that at the time. So it was kind of, where you would play again, and sometimes you would come up with something completely different that you would surprise yourself with, and he'd be like, that's what I was thinking you would maybe, and he would just go that, or we would come up with what we had, and he'd be like, well, I just wanted to, peek around and see what you might come up with, and that kind of thing. And, before computers, of course, we weren't allowed to, really change tempos the same way you can now. And it was always a problem with being a guitar player, because you can't slow down a song and keep a distorted guitar tone the same. Or so we had a song on the Poets and Madmen record that was like 8.5 minutes long, and I recorded it 3 times. So you got to figure it this way. That's like 2 songs 3 times. It had clean guitars on it too. So you had 4 tracks of distorted rhythms, stereo tracks of cleans, that Telly thing. So just keep doing the math on that. 3 times of all those tracks. I literally spent like 3 full days, because he changed the tempo a couple times. And the end of the song, I didn't realize I wrote this riff that when I did the first rhythm track, there was little pick clicks, because there's a long end of the song with all these counterpoint vocals, which was a big trademark at TSO and Savatage. I was alternating whether I was clicking once, twice. So we sat there, and Paul's like, no, just listen to it, stop, and do what you did. So we were doing tape rolls and getting it. But when you had to do that 8 times, it was like, it just kept going. It was 3 different things through. But, he was a perfectionist with what he did in the studio, and he would take it, I think, a lot further than many people. He would listen to the mixes and be like, I want the snare drum up a half a dB. And our Dave Whitman, our engineer, would be like, after a while, you'd lose his mind. You'd be like, "Whoa, here's a half a dB," and it would just be like one of these things. Or Paul O'Neill heard a half a dB, so you'd have to bring it up a half a dB or down a half a dB. But it was, it was just a magical thing with him. It was different. Going to the studio was, like living my own reality TV show. I wasn't always playing, but I was always there. I would go to the studio because I was one of those. He was very private about who would be in the studio, and even with some of the band members, he just didn't want everybody around all the time. But me and Oliva, we were like I think we were kind of like his entertainment. So he liked to have us there always, if he wanted to bounce things off our heads, or if somebody happened to show up, he had somebody there to introduce them to or things. So we were just always there, even if we weren't working. We were going in there to hang out and listen to him talk. And like I said, one day it'd be sushi, the next day he'd go, "We're ordering steak today." And like, all right, get me the $70 T-bone. It was just fun. I mean, it was a different time for us all with him.
What do you think you miss most about him being around? Because you've mentioned, like, he just sounds like a visionary. He sounds like he just had such a way of executing the thoughts in his mind, which I truly believe is so important. I've said the quote in the past, but Frank Zappa used to say that, the best thing you could ever hope for is that, people can complete the idea that you hear in your head, but that almost never happens. And it sounds like he was very adamant about making that happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I think sometimes it's weird. I kind of miss the chaos. Because things were always, he would walk in the room and it was never like, we were doing an arena show and he was out of town. Everything was like, he'd walk in the room. It's like the meter just went different. It was a different day. And I think there's just, at the time, you were like, oh God. But now I think that, with that chaos is gone, every day kind of goes like this, and
it's an energy shift.
Yeah, it's not that that's a bad thing, because on a level of 1 to 10, we're probably at a 9.99999, but it's like he just had that thing that made it go to 11. It was like there was something about
one
him.
more.
Yeah, there was something about him that just, look at some of the videos when he'd wander out on stage with us. I was watching one, I forget what we were doing. He came out on stage. We were playing, I think it was Radio City Music Hall with the Beethoven's Last Night tour. And he came out during The Mountain and some other, I think one of the other Savatage instrumentals that we recorded for TSO. And you just watch him come out and he's throwing his sunglasses out there and he's on. It's just, there's that, uncontrolled chaos that was perfectly controlled by him because he knew what he wanted to do or what he was doing, but it only happened when he was there. So there was just something that, you always knew when Paul was there, besides the fact that there would be like a whole pile more of merchandise you knew that was going to be handed out around the venue by him when he went wandering, and there was a room with his name on it, and the dressing in the hallways when you walked in your room, it's like, Paul's coming, and for me it was weird because there could be 13,000 people in that arena, and I'd look back at the soundboard and see him standing there and he had those glasses on, and I would get nervous because I would think, like, even that far away through those sunglasses, he has to be looking at me. So, it's like he would always feel like if you hit one wrong note, it's like, oh shit, he had to have heard that one. But he'd come up on the stage and he'd be like, it was God, boss. And he'd always made me feel like I had to be even better when he was in that room. It was just something that he had. But I think now that he's passed away, I try to keep that element of he's always watching there, because now he could be, he could be there every day. Before he wasn't able to be there every day. Now he can. He doesn't
speaking of, he really did notice everything. And of course, I didn't get to interact with him on the level you did. But I remember, usually as a string player, you're pretty peripheral, and a lot of people don't notice you if you're on a tour. You're just kind of in your own section. But there was one show I played that he was there. I think it was the first show of the tour. And he stopped me after the show and he's like, great hair. What year were you born? And I'm like thinking like, what? And I was like, 1989. He's like, all right, hold on. I've got something for you. And then, with the sunglasses on, the leather jacket, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a silver dollar. Says, this is from 100 years before you were born, 1889. He said, hold on to it. And then he asked me my name and he was just like, great hair. Just disappeared into the night. And I still have that silver dollar. So yeah, I still have it.
Silver dollar saloon.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of silver dollars too. And I always wanted to get together with him because he had a big collection of them. And I like to collect the ones that have the rainbow coloring on them that they get from being in the outside of the tubes, because silver does a very unique rainbow coloring. They're all different in shades, but it's something that silver does really cool, and I never got that chance to sit down with that. Yeah, Paul was very into the hair thing. It's like because we're in an arena and people are kind of far away from us, so you wanted you to look like you were a guy in a rock band. Paul's he was a child of the 70s, and everybody was Aerosmith. He managed Aerosmith and Ted Nugent, and everybody it was all about that. And it was funny when we were doing the first auditions for East West TSO. Savatage had a convention in New Jersey. There was a Savacon, it was called. All these kids came out to give us a question and answer, and there was a couple bands playing, and one of them had a bass player in it that I thought was really cool. He kind of reminded me of the bass player that was in King Diamond's band when Savatage toured with them. His name is Hal Patino, and I got Hal was in the Dr. Butcher thing that I put together with John, and this kid just reminded me of Hal. He had long curly hair, and he was just he was a pretty badass performer. And I told him, I said, give me your number. I said, I don't know what, but we're going to use you for something someday. And that was David Z.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
And I called up David, I'm like, I want you to go down to SIR in New York, and Paul wants to meet you and hear you play. So David walks in the room looking like one of the kids from New Kids in the Block. He cut all of his hair down super short, and I was like, I'm doomed, because the long hair was what I thought Paul was really gonna like. And I introduced him to Paul, and I could see, Paul was just like, because I told Paul he had long hair and he met him, but then there was just something in his personality that Paul loved, and then he played his bass and did his thing, and Paul just fell in love with him. He was such a talented kid, and that look was something he carried well, and people liked it, and he did his little dances with his bass that were a big part of his stage thing. He had a very unique and very mobile stage performance that a lot of times did go almost dancing, and it just worked really well for him. But it was kind of funny because that's why he has a nickname of Skippy, because
I always wondered. Okay.
He wandered.
By the way, guys, I just heads up. I got to run for now, so because I'm gonna go drain my knee. But I just wanted to say, Chris, thank you so much for my right in the middle of your story. But I just wanted to say thank you so much. Like I love everything about like what you do, and we really appreciate you coming on the show. So I'm sure Cory can edit out this silliness, but I just wanted to say personally, thank you very much, man.
No, thank you for having me, and I hope you get what you need.
Yeah, an effusion.
Ben is the true old man of the group here.
I really am, dude. You have no idea. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon.
All right,
Cheers.
bye, Ben.
Bye.
Yeah, so I looked at David, and he walked in the room, and I go, "What are you doing?" I said, "David." He goes, "What?" I said, I met you 3 months ago, and you looked like Hal Patino from King Diamond. I said, now you look like freaking Skippy from Family Time, or Guy. What was that family? Skippy was
Is that Ties?
Family Ties. Yeah, it was in a Family Ties. I said, you look like Skippy, and he did. Without the guy, he looked like that guy Skippy. That was the hair. That's the first thing I could think of. And then I just started calling him Skippy, and so did everybody else, and that's where the Skippy came from. because he wandered in there and all his hair was cut off. And
I'm
then
gonna have to put the picture up on the video podcast just because it's
yeah.
a funny.
I think it was Family Ties. It was Family Ties. Yeah.
Mark Price.
That was that. But Paul, yeah, he loved the image. He liked people to be, full on rock in the right situations, as he would call it. He wanted us to be rock and roll stars, and he worked with some of the best. I mean, like, he was out working for Aerosmith, when he was very young. He got involved doing a lot of stuff on their tours when he was probably not too much older than I was when I was working. He got out there, so he saw those guys in there. He had Joe Perry and sleeping on the management couch sometimes. So it's like he witnessed a lot in his life. So
right.
Yeah. It's funny, we talk about look, and you mentioned Joe Perry, and we've gone into great detail about how Joe Perry like embodies the look of rock and roll. Like, as soon as he wakes up, when he goes to bed,
he's got like the full on chain.
His teeth.
Yeah. No, I don't have that much patience to worry about that much of how I look. Plus, I live in a place that doesn't have a whole lot of neighbors, so I don't really worry about it. Although the Google Earth thing kind of creeps you out. It's like you look at that and it's
like,
it is a little weird.
You'll be fine.
Wait a second, they could see me naked in my hot tub from the sky right now.
So I want to talk a little bit about what you are up to now, and kind of a little more about your guitar playing. In preparation for the podcast, I went through, listened to some Savatage, listened to some TSO, listened to some of the new stuff you put out, the Spirits of Fire. And I know one thing I noticed from every project you're involved in is the way the guitars and the rhythm section are so cohesive. Like, there's something really cool about all the riffs and the way that everything connects and is very powerful and like almost a very united force. Can you talk a little bit about your guitar playing and your guitar style?
Well, I think the fact that I started professionally as a rhythm guitar player probably had a lot to do with just the way I hear music. I mean, like I said, there's millions and millions of guitar players that can play lead guitar and great lead guitar and this and that, but there's just something to me about, people always say about that, Malcolm Young thing, or the people like James Hetfield, the ones that really are really great rhythm players. And when I grew up with a drummer as an older brother, I just was used to playing together with that. And I hear the beats, I think, and I want to lock in with those drums when I'm playing. And there's something about that. To me, the thing I get the biggest rush on stage is when the band is locked in as a rhythm section, the guitars and the drums. And that's something that Al Pitrelli is very into as well, which is why I always love doing the TSO tours that are, just me and Al, because it no offense to any other guitar players I play with, there's just some, when you marry a certain guitar player exactly like that, it's so powerful. And that's what happened with Chris Oliva, and that's kind of the same thing that happens a lot of times with Al, where we're just, I think it comes from the way your style is, or your picking style or something. You'll just play chords and things the same way. Even if people are reading something on sheet music to play it some way, for two people to play it really identically, it comes a lot sometimes from the soul and from what's in you as far as you are. And I think that's what I do a lot with my records. And I like to, even with my solo records, I like to have the drums done. I'll record my demos and I'll send them to drummers, and I'll get the drums back, and I like to record me to the finished drums. And that allows me to hear the drummer. And because a lot of times, you're with these projects nowadays, nobody's in the same spot, and if you don't have that element of that. Yeah, if you're not able to rehearse with the band, then you really can't get that band feel. And even the drummers, no offense to the drummers, sometimes they literally only hear the drums. I mean, I know drummers that would record their drum track with a click. I don't need this song. They'll have the song charted out. I'm not going to name names, but these are some well-known drummers. I know one in particular that would chart out his drums and not listen to the music when he recorded it. It's like, so you're basically only this song, you only hear you. You know, even when the record's done, you're only going to hear you. I mean, it's really, and it's, drummers are interesting characters. I love drummers.
Understatement.
And, I think everybody should have one. Yeah. But there's every band should have one. But it's just kind of funny with that. Sometimes I think that's what they hear. They'll listen to a mix and it'll be like, what do you think? Well, you know, the ride cymbals could have come up. I'm like, that's what this song.
That's all you heard, yeah.
That's all you heard with this song is what the ride cymbal. But I guess it's just a drummer thing. God bless them. But the first Spirits of Fire record, for instance, Mark Saunders' drums were done to my final guitars. I didn't, Roy Z was producing that record. I was sending him my guitar tracks. Zonder didn't record yet, so he was doing drums to my guitars. And he's a prog drummer, and I listened back to it, and I'm like, he's thrown the beat in a different thing, which is fine, but when you're a guitar player, I still hear my beat.
Right.
You hear the song going off the road, and driving in the fucking speed bumps on the side of the highway. I hear it straight, going in between the white and yellow lines. And the speed bump is cool, but it kind of took me off of driving straight. And there's sometimes the beats disappear. And I'm talking the actual groove of the song will disappear to that. And this new Spirits of Fire record, what I did was I listened to his drums. And when that happened to the beat, I played straight through. Like, I changed my guitar parts a little bit to straighten where he didn't straighten. And then I would play along with his fills to make it heavy and become the actual song. So I was enjoying, it was like a video game. How do I, focus what I'm doing on that? And then, Steve went and did his bass over both of us, finished that way. And then Steve's bass came in and then created this freaking wall because we all heard this piece that way. And I think it makes, it's a disadvantage of having to do these virtual recordings in different places where you don't get to sit in that room and know when something is heavy when you're playing together, and everybody likes what they hear in their headphones at home.
Right.
There's something about, when you think about it, it's like, all right, well, what's this going to sound like live, and what would be a better live song? And I think that's going back to where my rhythm guitar playing is, because I want to see the crowd move. And an example of this, and it's no disrespect to this band because they're amazing musicians, but Dream Theater, we were in Brazil playing in Monsters of Rock, and they were playing, and I think I was watching the show with these Glenn Hughes and the guys from Manowar were on the side of the stage watching them, and you looked in the crowd. They're playing through these songs, and we just played, and we had, Gutter Ballet. You had 40,000, 45,000 people bouncing to the beat of Gutter Ballet. Dream Theater's playing. You had 40 people playing air drums throughout the 40,000. If you look at 40,000 people, you saw 40 Mike Portnoy fans go crazy on air drums, and the rest of the kids were trying to figure out where one was.
Yeah, have you ever tried to headbang to 7/8?
And then all of a sudden they kicked into part of Enter Sandman and one of the songs they were playing, and the whole crowd started bouncing. And I looked over to frickin' Glenn Hughes and I was like, see, they found one. Like I said, I love Dream Theater. I think that Petrucci's one of the fucking greatest guitar players alive, and they're just amazing musicians.
They live on the rumble strip, right? That's kind of like for your earlier analogy. They're riding the rumble strip, and they do it very well, but it's not that down the middle of the road kind of thing.
So that's kind of where I kind of see songs in the simple way. I mean, I could write the muso kind of stuff like that, and one day I might actually do a solo record that is instrumental, which is kind of funny because I went to do solo records as a guitar player and sang. So I was like, let me do it. And finally on the last Spirits of Fire record, I didn't even, I told him, I said, I don't want to write the vocals on this record, because the first 4 songs on that record, I wrote the entire songs, because Ripper was just like, I'm kind of busy doing something. Can you send me some lyrics? I'm like, you're flying to Brazil. You can't write lyrics? Like, how busy are you on a plane flight to Brazil? But I wrote, the first 4 songs were basically all mine. And for me, it was kind of like, gosh, it felt like I was doing a solo record, because I sing my solo records, and then I'm like, all right, I'm doing my melody, what I would sing. So when we did the new record, I'm like, look, I want whoever is singing this record, because Ripper and Frontiers kind of had a falling out, and it was his choice not to do the record. And Frontiers asked me if I still wanted to do one, and I'm like, well, it's kind of odd, because Ripper's the reason why I did Spirits of Fire, but I want to do a record. So I did it, and first we had Todd Hall from Riot was going to sing, but he was busy with The Voice, and then I think his brother passed away, and he had some other things going on, and he was like, Chris, I can't really put the time in I think you guys need. And we had some cool stuff written on some of the stuff that was making it to the record, but Frontiers was like, we want you to try using Fabio, and I said, all right, well, let him write. And even Mark and Steve were like, well, use whatever singer you want if they do something cool. And I really like what he did. He went in his own way and did something different for him. It's very metal compared to what he did with Angra and with Rhapsody of Fire. And it's just, he did some really cool things, but I didn't want to be the singer on this record too, because then all the things you do start to sound the same. It's like, all right, I got to write a couple songs for a Savatage record, and it's just like I have 4 riffs, and they're starting to go on everybody's album. Like, how do I make this work? So, I didn't even want to write any stuff for my new solo record. I wrote one song during the pandemic that I released called "Sick of This Shit," which is pretty funny, because I like the comedy songs every once in a while, just because I live life. Life has been so bizarre sometimes, and if you don't throw the comedy, you got to throw the comedy in. And I think it kind of, Dee Snider always talked about how comedy and the sense of humor, it's important to have that. So I throw that stuff out and I'll release it for fun, because I'll just do that. And I was actually recording and finishing a country song I had called "Pain in the Ass" that I want to finish and do. I did some little videos that are on my YouTube with it, and it's just I like making people laugh. I think I'd probably, if I wasn't, people always said, what would you do if you weren't doing music? I probably would be making movies. I may be working in like a zoo or under the ocean or something like that, or I'd probably be like a dead comedian by now, because it's just like I see life that way. How comedians, they go to that depressed guy that brings out the happy side of life. It's like, but they're really never happy. And then the comedian has a dark ending. And it's just like, well, I don't want to be the comedian, because they don't really seem to have the happiest. So let me try the musician. I mean, and I can go that way and do what I do. I'm very, like I said, I'm very fortunate to have had that home set for me for such a long time. I think that, a lot of musicians spend their careers going through this and that and the other thing, and there's very few that can look at it like kind of like a Derek Jeter, where he started with the Yankees and ended with the Yankees. It's like I had a couple off seasons here and there, but I kind of look at those as like mental injuries. It's like I was injured during 1991. I was injured then. I was on the bench.
Yeah. Well, going back to the beginning, since we didn't cover it much, you've referenced many times that you had a band with your brother and like kind of a musical family. And, going back to the foundation of how you learned and stuff, how did you even get started on guitar? Like, where did you build, because at a certain point you have to kind of find your voice as a musician. And I'm curious to hear how you actually learned. Were you self-taught working with your brother? Like, how did you guys get into that sort of let's be musicians thing?
Well, the funny thing is I think I always really wanted to be a singer. I was in kindergarten or first grade, and show and tell I sang "Help" from the Beatles. So it was just like, I liked singing, but everybody thought I sucked as a singer. So it was kind of one of these things where my brother was a drummer. My family had no money. To be a drummer, it was $11. You got the drum pad and the sticks. To do all the other instruments, it was very expensive. I tried, I think it was clarinet or something like that. I couldn't blow on something all day long. I was like, I can't do this. I just can't fucking do this. So I went to the drums like my brother did, but then I was like, sorry, drummers, I wanted to make music. And I just didn't want to bang on the rubber pad. I wanted to make a song. I wanted to write a song. So drummers always hate me when I say that, but I went to the guitar since we already had a drummer, and I thought guitars were cool, the coolest looking anyway. I would look at Wings Over America. I got that record, I think, when I was about 5 years old. My neighbors bought it for a Christmas present, and I would look at the double neck guitar and a Les Paul, and I just loved guitars. And I'd go into the stores. My family didn't have very much money, and I would just look at electric guitars. And I think I had a really bad electric guitar when I was like 6, but I started taking lessons when I was 10, and then I only took a couple of years of lessons. My family didn't really have a lot of money, so by the time I was 12, I was teaching myself, and that's kind of where I've been from. I have had a lot of great teachers throughout the years, and the people I played with, but it was kind of that, and guitar just always attracted me. I would hide down here in our rehearsal room when everybody left the house. I would turn on the PA that we had for our band, and I would sing along with records. I'd sing along with Foreigner records. I'd sing along with Kansas records. I wanted to sing, but my brother and my bass player said that my voice sounded thin to go into the Ray Gillen thing, and didn't think I sang very well. And then I started thinking, well, singing's got to be something that you have or you don't have then. And I figured, I just suck. So I never sang. And when I went to do my solo record, the reason why I started singing was because I was writing songs for people, and you write a guitar part and a riff, and in your head you had a melody. And sometimes the melody's pretty obvious, or something that somebody wrote was identical to what you had. And, I wasn't getting any publishing for something that was in my head or something that somebody heard me do. So I went and started writing songs, and I'm like, well, I'm going to scratch some of these melody ideas down while I'm writing. And then I started listening back, and I was like, this is good. It's not terrible. So I did more. And that's when I first got Pro Tools, and I was like, all right, I can do this a few times by myself without people listening. And I could stink and make it good. So I wasn't pitch correcting anything. I was just doing things and putting harmonies on. And that's when I would record like demos of songs, my song like Music Man, that had a full song of harmonies like Crosby, Stills, and Nash, just because I was having so much fun singing. I finished the Music Man song for the very first time. Didn't even have my solo do it yet. And I swear I cried listening to it, because I was so happy to finally be able to do what I think it was I always wanted to do, which was sing. And the shitty part about this industry is critics and people like that will listen to what I do recorded with my singing, and I don't suck. I'm not the greatest singer in the world, but I'm definitely a lot better than a lot of singers that sing. And I'm not saying that as an asshole. I'm just saying it as a fact. I'm not a terrible singer. And these critics and people will destroy you at it because you were known as a guitar player. So it was like an opportunity to come out as a singer disappeared when you spent 20 years being a guitarist. And that's what people know me as. So I do what I do. And it is probably why I throw in the other side of things, because I take the critics about as seriously as I'd expect them to take a song like Pisses Me Off, because I just, people that sit there and analyze your music like that, it's like, fuck you. Yeah. It's like, what? I get your opinion, but it means absolutely fucking nothing to me, because I do what I do. I mean, the greatest art in the world were things that people hated. The greatest music in the world, even in the classical world, were some of the stuff people hated.
Absolutely. There were riots when Stravinsky did The Rite of Spring. People were like, what is this garbage?
Yeah. And now it's like people can get on your Zoom and they'll have 6 people saying how much your record sucks. And it's just like, whatever, that's your opinion. And I was so happy to have the ability just to be able to do them myself at home and write that music. And I didn't even care if anybody liked them. It was kind of the thing. And I got my solo deal, and it was fun. And I enjoy making my solo records. And I just didn't, like I said, want everything to sound like them. So now as I'm working on a new one, I'm trying to figure out exactly what I want this one to sound like. And I'm kind of like in a rut because I have like 50 starts of songs, but I only have a few that I've really dove into. And I think that I actually want to go and just maybe take a couple days and try to start something and finish something from the beginning, and not go back and go, and just get into it and do that. And again, like I said, there's also the possibility that maybe I should just go get a drummer and start to write some instrumental stuff and go have fun with it and do the instrumental record. Or I've even talked to Al Petrelli and being like, it'd be fun for me and you to do something like a Hughes Thrall, where we did like, some cool guitar rock. And I love the instrumental, I mean, the solo thing, but there's a lot of sometimes you want to do something where you don't have all the responsibility, which is kind of another reason why, like I said, when I did the new Spirits of Fire, I'm like, can you have somebody else sing this? I just don't want to do everything. It gets exhausting, and my ears are one ear. My opinion is one opinion. So if I have a melody, it may not be that great, and I wanted to let people be a part of what was going on with it, so it just makes it easier and more fun. I had more fun recording the Spirits of Fire record because I was able to play more guitar too. I wasn't writing lyrics and trying to get that. I was able to focus on guitar parts and things, and that was fun.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think as instrumentalists, a lot of us think, for me, for example, I'm a violinist and I play in a band, and I think about, okay, if I were to do a solo project, what would that be? Because the expectation is always vocals too. It's more accessible. So it's really good to talk about, rediscovering something that you love later in life, or changing what you do, or introducing something new, because it can be really easy to get stuck into saying like, okay, I've been a violinist my whole life, so that's what I'm always going to be, and I got to do the same style of music or whatever. But it's amazing that you're developing your other interests too and jumping into it like that. That's really cool.
Well, I mean, it's also hard too, because, you could turn around now and it'd be one of these things where people would put up, Chris Caffery says he hates critics, and it's not that I hate critics. I hate having to deal with the seesaw, because you'll read one review, the guy gives it 10 out of 10. This is great. I love this. It's magical. It's perfect. It's this and that. And then next review comes up, 1 out of 10. Why does this guy even sing? This is the biggest fucking joke I've ever heard. And it goes up to the other one. Oh, this is decent. All right. I wish you would do Savatage, Brian. It's like, that's where, if anything I hate, it's that. It's the yo-yo. So because if opinions are possible to be that different on your music, then your music is possibly really good or really bad. It's like the guy who thinks it's bad can be wrong. The guy who thinks it's right can be wrong too. But when these guys that think it's wrong can actually dictate what happens to your records, when they put it in a magazine, and then people will be like, don't buy this one. I mean, so it's like one of these things where it's it comes into the actual effects of what happens with you, or who wants to do something with you. If somebody in a record company listens to a record and I was like, I don't love that one, that people, it can affect your actual career, and that's something with that. So I think where that comes in, where I just go, all right, well, I'm going to be the artist. Fuck you. I'm going to be the artist. And if you like what I do, that's fine. If you don't like what I do, maybe one day somebody will. And that's kind of how I do that. Like I said, with the new record, I'm not having trouble writing. I'm having trouble figuring out the hell I want it to sound like. It's like I have songs that sound like ZZ Top, and songs that sound like Kiss, and songs that sound like Pantera, and songs that sound like Kicks, and songs that sound like Crosby, Stills. And I was like going, okay, but that's kind of where I was on Faces. But do I really love any of those songs individually as much as I did when I wrote those ones on Faces, or am I just trying to dive for things? So which is where I said, all right, well, let me just like find something to happen one day and get a lyric in my head, and I'm going to start and finish a song idea. and I'm going to go through it, and the next day I'll turn it on, and if I like it, then maybe I'll do it that way. Because I don't ever have a problem writing, but I have sometimes problem writing things that I like too, and it's like I want to like what I'm doing, and that's always important.
When you come up with a song idea, how do you hear it in your head? Are you hearing the full kind of arrangement and mix and stuff? Are you kind of doing that layer by layer? You're like, this is a good part. How I'm going to build and build and build upon that.
Well, I learned from writing and singing, because my first solo record, I wrote a lot of those riffs before I sang on them.
Yeah.
And oh boy, was that interesting when I went to play some of that stuff live. Like, you idiot. You can't, it's like, wax on, wax off. It rubbed.
Yeah.
I was like, so now, at least I know if I have a really difficult to sing over guitar riff, and when the vocals come in, I'll take it down to something straighter that I could sing over. But that first solo record, I did that, and I was writing some stuff musically before. Now is a lot of times I will write things lyrically first, and I think that's what I have not been doing at the moment. I don't think I've been, because the world's been so messed up. I'm like, how do I want to write? Because I don't really want. I did records that some of them had sounded angry, and other things. I don't really want to sound angry, because I'm not really angry right now. I look at people in the world and I get confused, and I'm like, I think the world is pretty effed up right now. But I'm not I'm not angry. I'm happy with a lot of things that go on in my life and what I've done. And so I kind of want to write good music, but I don't want to be like Poison happy, but I don't want it to be like pisses me off to press. So I'm like, how do I find me? And I'm like, let me just go and start to find some things that I like that could be just like strong, straightforward songs. And I think that is where I'm talking about now, where you just find something that happens in one day and go, okay, well, I'm just going to focus on it, and literally look for something that you did that day and go, I want to find something today that I'm going to write a song about, and make it a task of myself to find something. And it's not that difficult to write the choruses. I've written choruses on my lawn tractor. It's to get the rest of the song, to get the verses, in parts, and how do you make these verses come, alive, or maybe give double meanings into what's in the song itself, and this and that. But, I've written lots of melodies and ideas on my lawn tractor, or in a car or something.
It's funny you mentioned that. There's something about mowing the lawn, or doing anything that has like an engine that has almost a pitch, because I find myself doing that as well, like writing either melodies or stuff, because I have a pedal tone going while I'm doing it.
Yeah,
so you're walking around
sure.
with like you get like a G sharp for like an hour and a half, and you just get this in your head, and you're like, all right, like I can play with my modes and try different like things like that. But when you're writing, does it have to be a moment of like motivation, inspiration, or do you sit down and go, I'm gonna write?
Yeah.
All of the above.
Yeah, I just say that because we've talked to a few people that kind of have to, they can't plan to write. It has to be like all right, I'm feeling it now, drop everything and do
Spontaneous.
it. Whereas other people are like, I'm going to write from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. today.
Well, before I was living back up here, I'd come up here on the weekends and do a lot of yard work and stuff. And I had a small digital recorder here, and I would just have a drum machine and play riffs, and I would pick times to do that. And I would go to the city and piece together what I had. I think my problem is now is like I have a lot of responsibilities. I take care of my mom. I take care of almost everything in this house and yard and everything. So I'll get up and I'll be like, tonight I'm going to write. Later on, once it's all done, I'm going to get in my studio. I'm going to write. It'll be like 9 o'clock at night, and I'll sit down. Then I'll wake up at 12:30 at night going, I just fell asleep for 3 hours. I was like, am I going to write? So it's sometimes I think it's where you just run out of the energy that you had when you woke up. It's like, I'm going to do all this later on. And then I think that was the advantage I had to living in the city without having the yard, where I was able to just focus on that, the daytime. Actually, I'll tell you something funny right now that kind of messed me up is I started going back to the gym, which I have a gym here behind me, but it's just boring. And I wanted to get into the gym. And my gym used to be open till 10 at night. And that would have been the time I would have loved to have gone to the gym. Like after 8 o'clock at night, it's usually when all the dinner and yard and house stuff is done. I'd go at 8 or 9, go to the gym. It's kind of dead from 9 to 10 at night. It was quiet. You figure it was COVID safe, but they started closing at 8. So I go right now, usually 2 o'clock in the afternoons when I head to the gym because it's empty and I can get my stuff done before the after workers start showing up. And when I have to get home to deal with, my home chores and things. But I think that what that does is it kind of strips me to that tired point in the evening when I've done yard work and gym work and business work and my merchandise work, and I've gone to the store and I fed my dog, I fed my mom, I cooked, I've cleaned, and then it's like, okay, so I'm going to go down in the studio and I'm going to do what? It's like I'm going to sit down and wake up 3 hours later. And it's like what happens a lot of times with it. So I think that's where I say, okay, well, one of these days I'm just going to go and take a day and go, this day I'm going to find something about this day and write it, and you just go, it's easy to do if you just pick a groove, and I'll set my click to a tempo and I'll just start playing, and I'll go through and do stuff, and then I'll start layering it. And if I could get through layering rhythms through a verse and a chorus and get down a verse and a chorus worth of really bad melodies and lyrics, then I'm like, all right, let me listen to it the next day. And if I go, all right, this is worth finishing, then that's forget it. But I'd actually like to get it to a point where maybe I can be like, all right, let me just finish one. I'm going to try that with a couple things. Last night I was going through, I have so many ideas, and it's just like, all right, I can finish this one. I'll finish this one. I'll finish this one. It's like, but I don't want 50 songs. I want to have, the
right,
ones I think are right for this record now. And sometimes I'll find one that I didn't release in the past that I'll be like, all right, this song, I should do this now, because maybe it was something lyric or vocally that I didn't think I sang well enough, or I have a better way of singing the melody. So it all depends. It's good sometimes to look back for things like pain in the ass and find the country song and do it. But, it all depends, it really all depends. And sometimes it's one of these things where I just bought a little Boss. I had a Boss guitar synth with the MIDI thing on it, but it's always such a pain in the ass to keep that thing working. And I hadn't had it plugged in, and there's a little Boss synthesizer pedal that I got, which is really cool. It's got like hundreds of synthesizer sounds in it that you get out of pedal. And that kind of thing is so amazing what just changing the guitar into something else will do for your writing.
Yeah, for creativity.
It's like I play keyboards, but I don't play keyboards enough where I'd be happy writing on them. And I think that when you're able to change the personality of a guitar completely, and that had worked a lot with some of my original solo record writing. When I had that guitar synth, I was kind of changing the personality of the guitar through synthesizer sounds, and that became fun. And I think that pedal is something that I'm going to have a lot of fun with in the next couple of months. I just got it, but I've been messing around with it, and it's fun because you create a whole orchestra of sounds behind you with it, and it's just it'll be things that could, I think, a lot of cool ballads and emotional songs, and even a lot of cool, really like deep, dark, heavy songs I've written have been placed around these crazy, weird synth parts I wrote on guitars.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I mean, a lot of times just changing the sonic palette or getting a sound will inspire you to have a melody or something. So that's really important.
I mean, it's like, you got the 8 crayon set or the 64 crayon set. What pictures, what are your pictures going to be like? And the more, sometimes you can do the greatest picture in the world with 2 colors, and sometimes you need, as I do art all the time, you need all the paints. So it's like I got 100 million paints.
Oh my gosh.
I do my art here. I like doing my art. I have art tables, a couple of them, and I always felt like I was so disconnected from the world when I did my actual art, like the sea glass stuff or other things. So I'll sit here and I'll do things and I'll make them here like that thing, or like this little Easter bat. These are all little pieces of glass that are cut. So I'll just
Oh my gosh.
I'll cut pieces and I'll make glass, or this is all glass on an Easter egg. But there's all kinds of really cool things that I've made for people, and I like sitting here and doing it because I can put on sports or put on TV or whatever, and I don't feel like I'm disconnected from the world sitting at this bar. Plus, it is a bar, even though I'm not drinking. It's a positive kind of scene that kind of reminds me of a lot of places I've traveled. So it's just there's a really good energy for me to just sit and be creative here as far as the art side of things goes, not the music.
How long has art, aside from music, been a big part of your life? Was that something that you've always done, or is that something more recently?
This is recent. I was probably 5 years ago when I was actually in Florida. I was down there with Jimmy Sturr, the Polka King, because I played in his orchestra, and it's my off time. And I was staying at his condo in Florida down in Palm Beach, and I was actually out looking for shark's teeth. I wanted to find shark's teeth. And there was this lady who was looking for things on the beach in the morning. I'm like, what are you looking for? I figured she was going to say shark's teeth or silver dollars. Like, I'm looking for sea glass. I was like, sea glass? The fuck is sea glass? And it's something I saw my whole entire life. So I asked Jimmy's friend later that night. I said, these people were down there looking for sea glass. He's like, you didn't know? Like, no, he goes, everybody looks for. So all of a sudden I became like the sea glass hunter. And I was the best sea glass hunter I think there ever was. The old ladies hated me. They would get up in the morning, the beach would be empty. I'd be up there 5 a.m. with the flashlight, clearing them all out of the beach would be empty of sea glass. I'd have like 80 of them, and I'd have blues and everything. They're like, how did you get those? It took me months to find them. Like, I worked the current. I was gay, but then I just had that. And then I had, Wilbur, the metal fit, and I looked online and there was these little elephant bead cage things that I was able to find, and I would put little pieces of the colored glass in it and sell them online. And then I just started having so much sea glass that I brought some to a TSO rehearsal before the tour one year, and I started making little Christmas ornaments, and it was fun, and then I just started doing more involved, and I get custom orders from people all the time. I was making like there's one TSO guitar, this is made off of glass, and it just went, and in a matter of 4 years I became somebody who was doing these tiny little bead cages and necklaces to making things like this is a birdhouse that
Amazing.
Most of some of the little art things on the outside are not sea glass, but the actual all the glass that's covering it is. So, and I happen to live in New York, which has some of the greatest garbage in the world, so it's easy to find up here. I mean, it's a lot easier to find sea glass up here than it is down south. We have a lot of garbage around, so the ocean, I know where to look. I have some good spot. I can find 1,000 pieces in an hour. It's crazy. And I can find all different stages of it, because if you want to, put things on something like this, you need it to be flatter. And if you want to do some things, you want rounder, but so you could find pieces that are less rounded, because, the real sea glass people, if they put them in a jar, they want to see the really nice, well-rounded ones, which I know places like that, but they tend to be a lot smaller. But it was just kind of like 4 years ago. And then it went to the point where it's like, oh, I'm going to do the ghost from Blueberry. And it all comes from me with this and not cutting my fingers off. A diamond cutter on a Dremel, and just not cutting my fingers off. That's how
And for listeners and viewers, is there a place where people can find your work and purchase or just see what you're up to?
What I do with it is most of the sea glass goes on to chriscaffery.com through what is called Wilbur's Wonders. So it'll be in the metal fit sections there, and I'll put them there, and I'll sneak the custom stuff there. Or people, if you want something, people can order it from there, and I take a deposit and I'll try to put it together. And I try to make it as reasonable as possible, but everything takes a certain amount of glass and a certain amount of time. So, I've done some, I give a lot of money from these to charity. So I've done some charity auctions of them, which goes really well. Wilbur likes to give to children's cancer and to the elephant sanctuary. So we give money to charities, and it's just something fun for me. I always like making art. And actually in the 2020 year of the pandemic, I had made and sold probably 340 pieces of glass art. So it was kind of like when the world closed down, I just was making glass art.
Set up shop, yeah.
And it was funny because I'm always home, and I would leave and go tour with TSO in November and December. So that first year, life was not weird for me right away. Everybody was like off the road, and everybody started doing the Zoom thing. And they're like, "You're going on our Zoom thing?" I'm like, I want to get the fuck away from the computer, because I spent my time on the computer for all those years when everybody was away from it. I wrote the first internet tour diary ever with Savatage back in like 96. It's documented somewhere. And we had like one of the first fan forums on savatage.com. So I was doing the internet stuff years and years and years before it became like really trendy. And I just got, when the world shut down and everybody went to the net, I'm like, all right, you guys take over. So it's like, I'm leaving.
You've moved on.
Yeah, it's depressing enough watching everybody argue about everything. I'm leaving.
Right.
So I did my artwork, and
can we talk about, not to interrupt your train of thought, but since we brought it up, can we talk about Wilbur?
well, Wilbur has become he's like my little alter ego. He was a gift from somebody, and just became something I traveled around with. And I was always taking photos of Wilbur where I was. And then I don't love selfies and I don't love pictures. So I would say if I met Willie Nelson, I'd go, "Willie, can you get a picture with Wilbur?" So I'd hand him Wilbur, and there'd be all these pictures and Wilbur the Metalfin, I came up with the name Metalfin, and he just became really popular. And I started doing the jewelry and art, and he has his own Zazzle store. He has a Metalfin shop. I have my own Chris Caffery Zazzle store too. We all have a lot of merch items there. And he's just become very popular. There was a book company that was going to do a book for him, but they started to put it for sale on Amazon before I even signed the contracts. It was people were like, I just put a down payment down on your book. I was like, I didn't sign and my whole thing is, the whole thing of Wilbur was a Beanie Baby, so it's like I had not talked to Ty about freeing rights to sell something. When I sell things through him, there's art of him not looking exactly like him. And it's like I've gone away from having that. But if I was to they wanted to use his photo on the cover of this book. And I'm like, look, do you have permission from Ty to use the photo of their thing? And they hadn't had it done yet. And I'm like, well, when is this going to happen? And it's like, oh, well, we'll take care of it. And I'm like, all right, well, I'd like it done before the contracts are done. And all of a sudden people were like, I just bought Wilbur's book on Amazon. And I was like, you did? So I called him up and I ixnayed his book deal. And we want to do some books, but it's going to be like children's. I have some children's stories about Wilbur that I want to do, but that'll be his own artwork. So it won't be something I have to worry about the copyright thing, because that copyright stuff's very serious. I mean, people don't realize that. I walk around with the Christmas with a winter hat on that has the Nightmare Jack on it, and an artist did an art of Wilbur kind of to be me with the hat with that little thing on it, and I put some stuff for sale on the Zazzle store, and Wilbur's little hat had the Jack thing on it, and those items got frozen and taken off for sale. And it's something that's that small, like on a deck of cards. I think I managed to get a couple of the decks before the item was taken down, to show you, like, this thing there, that's a art, and that little tiny thing is on his head. So that stuff is all very serious. So, and these people had already released this book with Wilbur on it as a beanie. You know, he's a beanie on Amazon, and I was like, that's
Gotta be careful.
I don't want that. You know? I don't want to be sued. But that's that.
Listen, Chris, we're coming to the end of our second hour, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's been awesome. It's been great to hear not only about, you know, the juggernaut of TSO and kind of your experience with them, but also the stuff that you've been working on and your approach to everything. So we appreciate you taking the time.
No, it's been great to hang out with you, and as someone that sat behind you on stage many times, and we've talked, of course, and hung out. But it was so great to hear your story in a way that even I hadn't heard it, you know, and talk about some of your experiences.
You could go over the next 72 hours of my life the next time we speak.
For sure. Well, we'll definitely have to do more episodes.
There's a lot of other stories. There's a lot of stories. We didn't get to, you know, I was in Metal Church in Doro, and I was even.
Oh, we got to do more episodes for sure.
I was in Wasp for 5 hours, which people don't even know.
All right, we got to leave them wanting more. So
we have to do part 3 and 4.
There's always more.
But thank you so much. You know, anything else you want to let people know? Obviously, you know, check out.
Or where
website.
can people find you? Yeah. A good way for people to come follow you.
No, I mean, just keep looking on the accurate Facebooks and Instagrams. It's kind of, I try to put things on both now because some people have gotten off of Facebook to Instagram and don't use both. So I kind of try to put them on both. I don't really do the Twitter thing, although some of these things kind of go off. So a lot of times I'll post onto Instagram on my personal, it goes there, and I'll try to get to my Facebook music. But, you know, the merchandise things, including like my CDs, and I've been making earrings and necklaces and stuff like that recently off of guitar picks, which has been kind of fun. I make them myself. So I get my drill and I cut holes and I make these things. So you're actually sitting next to a jewelry factory as well. But
yeah.
That kind of stuff is on chriscaffery.com, and the Wilbur stuff is there. Like I said, there's a Caffery's Corner on Zazzle, and the Metalfin Shop is on Zazzle too. And Zazzle's cool. If anybody out there, you know, wants to release some of their own merchandise and you don't have the money to put into a lot of development of products, and you have Zazzle's a really good way to be creative and to release a lot of different things, just to let people who may not know what that's about, but it's a good company to work with, and they're pretty easy to deal with. But
that's amazing.
That's that. You know, Spirits of Fire stuff is on Spirits of Fire Facebook or Frontiers things, and TSO, everything TSO was on Trans-Siberian.com. I think it's Trans-Siberian.
Yeah, we'll have links in the description.
Yeah, and Savatage is on the side, because Savatage has got a re-release of all the records on vinyl right now coming out. And I think Gutter Ballet and Streets had just came out. And they're really cool, these re-releases of Savatage. And, you know, all the news from TSO will always be on the TSO sites first. You know, so if I have any TSO news, I follow up TSO the next day usually. So if anybody's really anxious to find out TSO news, it's always best to go to TSO's site first, and that will usually be where that stuff pops to. But that's where everything is.
Great. Awesome. Very cool. Well, yeah, thanks again for joining us. It was really great to hang out with you, and we definitely have to have you come back for part 3, part 4, and beyond.
No, it's awesome. Thank you. I had a lot of fun. Now I'm off to the gym, and hopefully
all right,
come up with an idea to write about.
2020-d.com. We'll see you next time.
And so we said, we'll form a band, and we placed an ad in the Village Voice, you know, guitarist looking for a singer, bass, you know, I was looking for everybody. And then about 2 weeks later, Bill called me and he said, "Oh, do you know who Billy Idol is?" And I said, and by then, Dancing with Myself was kind of an underground club thing, you know. There was it was being played in the clubs, and I said, "Oh yeah, Dancing with Myself." And he said, "Yeah, well, we're managing him. He's just moved to New York, and you guys should meet." And we did, but my approach was that it was never like, "Okay, great, I'm going to be your guitar player and we're off and running," because we came from very different musical backgrounds, and it wasn't until we discovered our love of some of the glam stuff and Lou Reed and some of the, you know, I certainly wasn't a punk rock guitar player, although I liked, you know, a lot of those bands, and I liked the kind of English new wave stuff. But I said, look, I know every musician in New York, and I'll help you find a bass player and a drummer, and then when it comes time for guitar, hopefully you'll consider me. And I don't know if he looked for anybody else, but I got the gig. So.
Wow.